I've experienced the power of the sun a lot lately. It's weird living in one of the cloudiest places in America because you go somewhere that doesn't have clouds all the time and you forget that like people just see the sun every day. This time of year, like it's very easy just to go like a day or two without seeing like direct sunlight. And a few weeks ago, I got to witness a ring of fire solar eclipse when I was on vacation. And I actually had to help persuade a gas station employee that, yes, it's okay for her daughter to look at the eclipse. She's wearing these glasses. Here on the side, it says ISO, whatever certified. These are basically welding goggles on your face. And like, she's not going to go blind from looking at the sun through these for a couple seconds. But it really just brings the point home that like the sun is very powerful.
Yeah.
That like, if she wasn't wearing those glasses, like it could have done damage to her eyes. And in the past couple of weeks, I've had multiple people talk to me about the solar death ray. Do you know what solar death rays are?
No.
I don't want to call it a bit of a fad, but basically you take like a tube TV apart and there's a giant like Fresnel lens inside of the TV for these tube TVs. And it basically works like a giant magnifying glass, and people will take them out and they will point them at the sun in the same way that you would like kill ants with the
Right.
magnifying glass, but they will just like put like large chunks of metal. They'll put pennies on the ground and they'll just melt into a puddle, or they'll like I saw them put a can of Coke in one and watched it like it just like explode the metal everywhere. And like you can do some real damage with the sun and one of these solar death rays. So I tell you all this though just to say that like the sun has been on my mind a lot lately. And that's what makes Shark Ninja's claim about their new nonstick frying pan all the more ridiculous. Yes, so Shark, the vacuum company, and Ninja, the kitchen appliance company, it's part of the same company. They named it after their two most popular products.
Okay.
But it does sound like what an 8-year-old dresses up for Halloween. Like, I'm going to
Shark
be a
Ninja.
Shark Ninja. But on the product page for the Shark Ninja Foodie Never Stick Pans on several online retailers' websites, the first image is of the pan. That's pretty standard. Your first image is the product. And the second one is this image in this graphic, and it says, the difference is in the degrees. And it shows you that a traditional pan is heated to 900 degrees during the manufacturing process, and it loses its nonstick abilities over time. But don't worry. However, the Ninja Foodie Never Stick is heated to 30,000 degrees during manufacturing, and it won't stick. 30,000 degrees
30,000 degrees?
Fahrenheit. For context, the surface temperature of the sun is 10,340 degrees. And you're telling me they got something 3 times hotter for a $50 pan.
That seems absurd.
Yes.
I watch Forged in Fire sometimes. You ever watch that show?
No, but I've heard about
So
it.
they use forges and build these fires and make knives and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So like you've got to heat metal really hot to be able to move it, like to hit it with a hammer and
Now that
bend
you
it.
mention it, I think I did watch one episode, and I think they actually were doing cast iron pans.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but my point is, I don't remember how much, but I know it's not 30,000 degrees. Like
Yeah.
it's like 1,000 or 2 or I don't remember. I might make myself sound stupid here, but it's not 30,000 degrees.
Right. And so the core of these pans is made of aluminum, and that has a boiling point, not a melting point, a boiling point of 4,478 degrees. So if they exposed these pans to 30,000 degree heat, the pan would just like become a puff of
Be
smoke.
liquid. Yeah.
Well, it'd be gas. It would go from liquid to gas.
You're telling me the actual marketing material of this pan says they heat it to 30,000 degrees.
During the manufacturing process, that is what they say. You can go online. They're still up on Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot, like all of those sites. You can read that. So to make this even more questionable, don't worry. These pans are only rated to be used in ovens up to 500 degrees.
Oh my gosh. But that's, of course, because of the chemicals in the nonstick, and you don't want to toxic yourself, you know?
Right. So thankfully I learned about all this because there's a class action lawsuit.
Okay.
And I am all for it. I read some articles where people were trying to understand like what Shark Ninja is actually doing here. Because like we all agree, this sounds ridiculous. someone is suing them because this is ridiculous and it's not true. But like, how did they come up with that number? Like, where did they get this from? And some people think that it appears to be a technique called plasma spray deposition. And I'm not an expert with plasma torches, but you apparently take a plasma torch and you're heating the special powder up with the plasma torch, and it eventually liquefies and you're able to form a coating on the surface of the pan. And this is different than your Teflon style nonstick pans. This is like a ceramic style. So I think it's maybe not as effective at the nonstick, but it's more durable. And I think
Right.
maybe you're going to get less forever chemicals in you from what I can tell. But the tip of the torch is the most hot part, is the hottest part of the torch. And I think the tip of the plasma torch can get into the thousands of degrees. I don't know if 30,000, but the actual pan surface, like apparently the way you think of like heat when it comes to plasma is different than we think of heat normally. So that pan's only getting like a few hundred degrees. It's
the stuff going onto the pan.
yes, but when it's far away from the pan,
Sure.
even. So it's basically the same temperature as the competitors that they're saying are inferior.
I will say 500 degrees is higher than most nonstick pans can go in the oven.
Okay.
Usually, I think like normal nonsticks, like your Rachel Ray's or your Pioneer Woman or whatever, I think they can go. I don't even know if they can go in the oven, and if they can, it's like 425 or something. It's like
Right.
lower than 500.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, hey, at least that's somewhat of a selling point. But yeah, like what I've learned from working with large companies is that the guy operating the plasma torch doing this technique is so far removed from the graphic that they're suing over. And I think people like to assume that there's some like evil guy in a boardroom who's like, let's see what we can get away with. Ha ha ha. And what I found out for the most part in real life is like, maybe that's true somewhere. I think it's more like when you were in grade school and you had to play a game of telephone in class, and like the first person says something and then they have to whisper it in the next person's ear. Did you ever play
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Yes.
And by the end of like the 20 kids in your class, by the end, like the last kid says what he thinks he heard and
It's
we all
completely
laugh.
different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is kind of my theory of what is actually happening here, where yes, like the technician, whatever forger is saying, like, well, yeah, I use plasma
30,000 degrees.
Exactly. And like at some point he said the words 30,000 degrees, and then like that got parroted to the product team who passed it to the marketing department, who passed it to a third party, who farmed that out to a third party, who gave it to a copywriter who wasn't having a good day. And somehow that led to the 30,000 degrees. And the graphic, there's like a space laser looking thing hitting this pan right above it too. And like, if you couldn't tell, I run into situations like this on a much smaller scale at work where, sometimes like we are given materials that just don't seem to be true, and we have to look into them to say like, I mean, one of my little personal crusades is like, I don't want to put out misinformation as part of my job. So the side effect of that is I keep getting to learn about all these weirdly specific industries, which gives me unlimited amounts of ideas for future episodes. Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name is Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys. So, Payton, today I wanted to tell you about something from the late 1800s that changes the course of history even today for a small town in Wisconsin. A story that many consider to be a myth, but many still consider to be a true story about a real, although very elusive and quite possibly now extinct creature. Today, I would like to talk to you about the Hodag. And what is a Hodag, you ask?
Yeah, it sounds vaguely familiar. About a year ago, my dad showed me a map of the U.S., and I think there were cryptids on it. Or maybe I showed it to him. We were talking about cryptids, and I was looking at a U.S. map, and I feel like I heard about the Hodag. But that's all I know. Please educate me, Chris.
So I was also unsure when my friend Kevin asked me if I knew what a Hodag was. I have no idea. Well, the short answer is this. It's a creature that sits roughly 30 inches tall on some thick, short legs with huge claws. It has the head of a frog, the grinning face of a giant elephant, the back of a dinosaur, and a long tail with spears at the end. It's a carnivore meat eater whose diet mostly consists of a rather specific fine dining choice of the all-white American bulldog. And one of the reasons it's extinct is because of lack of all-white American bulldogs. The Hodag was officially first discovered in 1893 by a man named Eugene Shepard in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Nickname Gene Shepard, so we can call him Eugene or Gene. I may interchange the two names, but Gene was a lumberjack, pretty popular in the area, very well known. It's kind of a small area. People knew Gene, and he located a Hodag and rounded up some of his friends to go and help him capture it. It ended up being trapped in a cave, and they had to basically use dynamite to kill this creature because they didn't know what it would do. A photograph surfaced after this time of him, Eugene, all his friends, and this charred creature on the ground. And it was circulated in news media at the time. It was in the newspaper, and there's all these things that people talked about it. It kind of brought some notoriety to the town, Rhinelander, Wisconsin, of these people all standing around this charred beast. Pretty crazy, right? This garnered local attention, but even more abroad, but not quite as much as 3 years later when the same man, Eugene, in 1896, found another Hodag, but this time he was able to capture it live.
Oh.
Yes. And you're rightfully having some doubts the first time because, you know, Eugene, people know him, and he's maybe he's a little bit of a trickster, a jokester, a fun guy, and he all that comes out is this picture of this charred thing, right? So undoubtedly.
I feel like lumberjacks are often associated with finding maybe things that are questionably true. I think they appear in a lot of fairy tales because they're in the middle of nowhere in the woods. You hear things, you see things.
Right.
There's not many people around to say, "Oh yeah, he saw that thing. That's real."
Exactly, right? And maybe people know this about him, but now 3 years later, after people are familiar with the situation, he claims to have found a live one, and he is able to capture it. So him and his lumberjack buddies, they decide to cart this thing around and take it to fairs and take it to county events, right? And they kept it in a tent, and albeit a rather dark tent, and people flocked in from all over to see the live Hodag. This brought a lot of eyes onto Rhinelander, Wisconsin, into this county in Wisconsin that had never been there before. People from all over were hearing about this creature that they thought was just fake up until this point. There's a real one. They could go see it. And it even got attention from the Smithsonian Museum.
Wow.
And they were sending over some scientists to come and to look at it.
It is a very Midwest thing to do, though, to capture this cryptid and take it to your county fair because you know you'll win.
Right. Well, when the Smithsonian showed interest and we're going to send people out, that's when Eugene decided that he would say, well, I faked it. But the last time we killed it, that was real. This time it wasn't real. I was just trying to, it was just kind of a thing. It was a funny joke. I'm playing a joke. But this time was fake. So don't send your scientist. It's no big deal, whatever, right? People came from all around to see this. How could you possibly be convinced that he had a real life creature, a Hodag in the flesh? How is that possible? Well, he's a lumberjack, see, so he used his knowledge with building materials, and him and his buddies created something out of things that they were used to using. From what I understand, it was created with logs and covered with some leather from a tannery, and it was almost operated by some of his buddies like a marionette puppet.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So it was like a complex thing.
Like he built like an old-timey robot.
Yes, basically an old-timey robot, something that in a dark tent could convince people. And to be honest, this is the 1800s. Are people convinced? They've never seen anything like this, I'm sure, right? I don't know. Are they convinced or not? I don't know, but it was enough to garner attention from one of the biggest museums, I would assume biggest museum at the time, and eventually be found out. Well, the Hodag, because of this story, because of some other things, it eventually has attained a status, like right now, it has attained a status somewhat like these mythical creatures that are like the Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, where people are like, oh, it's a thing that everyone knows about, but no one's seen. No one has proof that this is a real thing, right? It somehow has made its way into pop culture like this, and it's still there now. It's like a smaller scale, but it's still there. It's in an episode of the newer series of Scooby-Doo.
Oh.
They have their own Hodag. It's in the Harry Potter universe now. It's in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It's found its way into many different things. There's even like old folklore stories that have them in it. It's been around. It's popular enough. It's made its way through. It has also forever changed the city of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Rhinelander has slightly over 8,000 people in the population.
How many Hodags?
But, well, I'm going to tell you. This is a city that knows its identity. And sometimes, we we do road trips, we go around America, we drive through small towns all the time that are just small towns, and the only thing that makes them what they are is the people who live in them. They have no identity outside of that. It's a house here and people here, and that's it. Rhinelander is not this place. You do not go to Rhinelander without understanding that you are in the place of the Hodag. Outside of the Chamber of Commerce building sits the capstone, the huge piece of art created by a local artist, the giant Hodag. You can go see it today.
Yes.
The Hodag is the mascot for the high school.
That's great.
And just by hanging out in town, you can find yourself at the Hodag Park, the Hodag Dome, the Hodag Snow Trails, which is the snowmobiling club, the Hodag Store, perusing the Hodag Farmers Market, training for the, and I quote, Hodag Run for Your Life, which is hosted by the YMCA, 5K, 10K, it's a run. And all of this you can do while listening to their local country music radio station, WHDZ 97.3, Hodag Country. This city knows who it is.
That's great.
They know their identity. The people who live there, they know it and they like it, and I respect that. Actually, I read about, my friend mentioned this to me, and when I Googled it, an Atlas Obscura article came up, which I was actually taught by you. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah,
but
one of my favorite sites, shameless plug for Atlas Obscura. They are a great website on the internet, and they just catalog all of the weird places that you can go visit in the world, all over the world. And whenever I'm driving or flying somewhere new, the first thing I do before I go is I just look up things like that. Like I was in Phoenix a couple weeks ago, and it turns out there is a artificial bat cave that is built out of some sort of like flood prevention thing in the city, and just thousands of bats live in this cave, and every night they slowly make their way out. It was a bit underwhelming, I will say. They were flying out like 4 at a time, but like several hundred bats came out of this cave at night.
Crazy.
And I would have not known about that except because of Atlas Obscura.
Yeah, I literally didn't know what it was until you were talking about it. You were going like on vacation, and you were like, "Oh, I kind of based my trip around this stuff." Like, that's crazy. And so I've looked at it here and there, but I found the giant Hodag outside the Chamber of Commerce, and it turns out I'm new to all this, but you can like have an account and you can like mark that you've visited these places.
Yep.
It's kind of a cool.
Yeah, I do.
Community. But I thought that this could be like a fun thing where we could make like a recommended factoid related list of things worth doing, right? And it could include, visiting a dirty soda shop in the West, or seeing a Nickelback concert, right? Or taking a battery to a Phillies game, right? Or eating horse meat.
Yeah.
It could include all of these things, but it would have
Atlas
to
Obscura
now...
they have a section called Gastro Obscura, and it's about interesting food related things in certain areas.
Okay. See, I didn't even know about that one. But I think we could make something like that, and I would love it if people were interested enough to go do that. But I think that now that would have to include visiting the giant Hodag statue in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Part of me wants to believe that the Hodag was a real thing, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't, right? I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
No.
Real thing or not, though, one thing is true. The Hodag will never die.
A little over a year ago, I celebrated my 30th birthday. And I'm not a very big fan of parties, but I was okay with Amy throwing me one for my 30th because it's a big milestone year. And one of the major themes of this party was cheese. She did a good job of listening to me make offhand comments about things that I might be interested in. And she knew that I had expressed interest in trying new kinds of cheese and learning what kinds of cheese I liked. And most of the cheese I eat is hot and or melted, and cold cheese is kind of a new world for me. And I think I had been to enough parties where there were charcuterie boards, and I just didn't know where to start. And I think that is kind of what motivated this. So she convinced everybody at the birthday party to bring a small wedge of cheese, and they secretly did this, and they went inside our friend's house that it was at and constructed a cake-shaped object from all of the wedges of the cheese.
That's cool.
And they referred to it as the cheesecake. And then we actually had like regular cheesecake too to eat as well. But I got to take all of that cheese home, and the goal was just to try different ones and sample them and see what I liked. And there was a ton, and I did not get through most of it. I'm sorry, everyone who attended the party. I was able to sample a lot of them, but it was it was a lot of cheese. Do you have any favorite kinds of cheese, or whether it's like a style of cheese or just like a method of preparation, or do you like any types of cheese?
I mean, I like hard cheeses, I suppose, like Parmesan or whatever. But I also just am like maybe this is real basic, but I like sharp cheddar a lot.
Sure,
Just like,
no.
and the sharper, like there's a limit with the sharpness, but like at the store, like when you just buy, like at any grocery store, if you can buy one that says extra sharp cheddar, that's usually pretty good. Like that's a level I kind of like it at.
Got it. And as far as like hot or cold, like, do you have, so you, like,
Yeah, cold.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it on a hamburger or whatever, but I like to eat, like I'll just slice it and eat it with a cracker or whatever.
Right. I know it's a super American thing to be like, to categorize cheese as hot or cold. Like no one else thinks like this.
I like cheesy dips, but that's usually with just like super processed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like chili con queso or like Velveeta or whatever. Like I like that kind of stuff, but that's like in a different place in my mind.
Sure, absolutely. It's like calling Taco Bell Mexican food.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, but no. Yeah. So this whole cheese-based quest that I had kind of went on, it eventually led to me buying a slice of Comte from a shop in Edinburgh. It was a little cheese stall at a farmer's market. The guy was like clearly from France and had moved to Scotland to sell all of his cheeses. And I fell in love with this cheese very quickly.
What is it called?
Comte. So I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. Comte with a little accent mark.
Okay.
So it's very similar to Gruyere.
Okay.
And it has like a buttery flavor, a little bit of a nuttiness to it. And it's something that you can definitely eat like cold sliced, but it also is very good with melting. So like there are a lot of kind of like, we'll call them like French style grilled cheese kind of things that we'll use Comte. Like it's very versatile. So it's a shame that I'm waxing poetic about this cheese because I now have a new favorite type of cheese, the double Gloucester. And I actually have some right here.
Double Gloucester.
Yes. So here, I'm holding it up, is a wedge of double Gloucester cheese. And I want to just cut this here quick. I have some crackers and just want to do a little live taste test.
Okay. It's got specs in it.
Yeah,
Can I
it
look
sure
at
does.
it?
Sure, yeah. You can read the ingredients list too if you'd like. The specs are onions and chives.
Okay.
And if you sniff it, you can smell it.
It
very
smells
strong, yeah.
good though.
Yeah.
Double Gloucester cheese, pasteurized cow's milk, salt, cheese cultures, enzymes, dried onions, chives. Where'd you buy that? Whole Foods. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's see it.
I'll do the honors here.
It feels softish.
Yeah. Where do I open this at?
I feel like under the sticker is where the.
Yeah, you can tell I'm still a bit of a cheese
I mean,
novice.
I am too. Like, for the most part, the cheese I buy is the stuff by the shredded cheese. That's, you know what I mean, like the very mainstream. And so this is fancier than my normal cheese for sure.
Would you call someone who's a cheese expert a cheese whiz?
Cheeser.
Follow my new cheese blog, Cheese Whiz.
Do you have like a fancy cheese slicer at your house?
I think we bought one at some point, but I'm not sure where it's at. It's like, it's somewhat cheap, but yes, it is meant for cheese cutting.
We always had a cheese slicer, like the wire, and you can adjust the depth or whatever. But that's all. I've always had one of those growing up. But I was at my friend's house, and his dad came home and was like, "Hey guys, I bought some fancy cheese and a cheese slicer." And so I'm like picturing in my head the normal thing, and he pulls out this cheese that like is similar to this, like fancy cheese, and then he pulls out like what's essentially like probably 12 inches by 8 inches slab of granite with like a wire on a handle, like a paper cutter almost.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I didn't even know that you could get a cheese slicer like that.
Yeah, this guy's not playing around.
No, this is real.
Okay, we got some almond nut thins.
Okay.
I don't know. I was probably gonna like put a little bit on. I don't know. I'll do one taste with just plain, and then like one with the cracker.
Okay.
Okay. You wanna
Yeah.
take a piece, do the honors. You can decide how much of the mouth noises you want to cut.
It has some sharpness, which I like.
Yeah. To me, it reminds me of like homemade mashed potatoes.
Yeah. It's the chives, so it's got to be, right? I never put chives in homemade ones, but like that tastes like I'm eating like fancy mashed potatoes a little bit.
Right. And like butter and cheese, but they both have like the milk product.
It's literally the potatoes without the potatoes. That's kind of what it tastes like. That's good. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hate to break it to you, but the reason that I like this cheese is not for the taste.
Oh, no.
I think it tastes fine, though. Like, yeah, I agree. Yeah,
It's
pretty good. I like the double Gloucester due to the competition that it creates in the world. Of course, I am talking about the sport of cheese rolling.
Cheese rolling.
Cheese rolling. Yes. There is a small town in England, and there are people in this town, and they roll a 7-pound wheel of double Gloucester down a steep hill, and then everyone races down the hill after it. The goal is to catch the cheese wheel as it's bouncing down the hill, but if nobody catches it, the winner is the first person to cross the finish line. And then it's at the bottom of this hill. The oldest record of the Cooper's Hill cheese rolling and wake dates back to 1826. And you might be wondering, what is the wake? I guess that's like a British way of saying like a festival. I thought it was like someone died and we're having their funeral at this cheese rolling event. But no, completely unrelated. So 1826, there are records of like the town crier talking about the cheese rolling. And even then they are saying like, this thing's been going on a long time. People think that this has happened for about 600 years at this point. They theorize that like the origins might have something to do with like fertility rituals or like a celebration of crops, because it happens in late May, like around American Memorial Day. Like they don't have it over there, obviously, but like spring holiday, I think is what they call that time. So in the 1980s, things start to get a little bit more standardized and official with this race. It's been going on for hundreds of years, but now we start to get good record keeping. So here's a basic overview of some of the rules. About 20 people line up at the top of this hill, and the official rolls the cheese down the hill, and after about a 1-second delay, there's an MC who's a separate person, and he or she signals the beginning of the race. And then everyone tumbles 200 yards down this hill. And
roll?
They aren't trying to roll.
But they fall.
All of them
Because I'm
do.
picturing, in my head, literally, when you start talking about this, is if I run as fast as I can down a hill, I fall down. So these people are falling down.
Yes, it is. I would say it is impossible to complete the race without falling at least multiple times. And if you look, like there's a picture that I saw that was taken from that top part of the hill. You can the hill doesn't look very impressive because you can't see it because it's a concave, because it is so steep that you just can't see down it when so imagine trying to run down that, or even like slowly walk down that 200 yards of that. And that means that it is really hard as you're going down the hill to stop. So don't worry, they have catchers for that. So there is a group of people that stand at the bottom of the hill, and they're known as the catchers, and their job is to stop people after they've crossed the finish line, but before they
crash.
Run into a building or die or something. And these are usually local rugby players.
Okay.
And they'll show up like in uniform.
That's
and
funny.
They it looks like they're enjoying it too much, because like when I thought about catchers, I'm thinking like they're going to try and help like absorb the blow a little bit and try to slow them down. These guys are just tackling.
They just like brick wall them.
Yeah, they're just like knocking these people to the ground, which watching it from afar is kind of funny.
Is this like a thing? Is this like a televised thing?
I don't know if it's on TV at this point, but it is heavily recorded every year now. But
I don't. You might be going to talk about this. I'm not trying to get ahead here, but does anyone ever catch the cheese?
We will talk about it. I was trying to leave a little bit of a hint that maybe, in theory, someone might catch a cheese eventually.
Because it seems near impossible.
Right, exactly. So I'd like to read to you some of the highlights of the past few decades of cheese rolling. In 1997, there were 4 races that were held just because like due to the width of the hill, they just break it up into like multiple heats and like it's not like a semifinals, finals kind of thing, but it's just like you won that round of the race. So in 1997, there were 4 races, 33 injuries.
Wow.
And I don't have a total number of contestants, but I would be surprised if that was like 40 to 50% of the contestants.
Yeah.
In 2001, the race was actually canceled due to an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, which I guess is a disease that affects cattle. And a lot of the cattle in that region had foot and mouth disease, and they had to close off the whole countryside. And they couldn't like let people in because they were worried about spreading this disease to cattle in other areas. So they couldn't do the race, but they had to maintain the tradition. So a single wheel of cheese was rolled down the hill with 0 contestants, and the only people present were the unofficial committee that runs the race every year, just to say it still happened, but no one caught it and no one won. In 2003, an earthquake in the country of Algeria meant that the volunteer safety team that attends all of these races to care for the injuries couldn't show up that year. So since all of the medical people had more important things to do in their lives that year, they had to cancel the race.
Because this is a high injury
Yes,
race.
like right behind the catchers is the medical crew.
What a ridiculous thing.
Yeah. So in 2010, there started to be a lot more worries about the injuries and specifically lawsuits. For about 15 years, there was one old lady who was responsible for making the cheese every year. She would had the farm, and she created the double Gloucester 7-pound rolls that were rolled down the hill. And some of the like cops in town, I think it was actually a constable, told this lady like, someone could sue you and maybe win because you're the one who made the cheese, and if they got injured, they could maybe pin it on you and you'd have to pay. So people are starting to get worried that the whole thing's going to get canceled, that like this is too dangerous, we're not going to be able to do it. They try to make some small reforms, but not a lot. First of all, they stop rolling the literal cheese down the hill. They now have like instead of it being like in like a encased wooden thingy, like a case that they put it in, it's now foam. It is now a foam cheese.
So it's fake cheese.
Yes.
Okay.
It's being rolled down the hill. So at least if that cheese hits you, which people think like could get up to like 50 miles an hour as it's going down the hill.
7 pounds at 50 miles an hour. That would like knock you out.
Right. So like the contestants aren't going to get hit, but like there are like thousands of people that line the side of this hill that like someone could easily get injured from
And
that.
it probably bounces and boom.
Oh yeah, it bounces like crazy.
Yeah.
So they decided like let's go to at least make the cheese a little bit safer. And in the first year that they do the safer cheese, we finally get our first recording of someone catching the cheese.
Okay.
Yes, Caleb Stalder is the first person on record to catch the cheese, and he golden snitches the competition. He is nowhere near first place as he's falling down the hill, but like in his words, like the cheese just took a weird bounce and turned to the side, and he went after it, and he caught that cheese, and despite having no chance of winning, he won that race because he caught it.
Is the cheese, now that it's fake, is it still 7 pounds?
I think...
Or would that defeat the purpose of having it be...
I think it is lighter.
Okay.
I do think it is lighter. I think they probably made it heavy enough that it still works. Because if you make it too light, it's not going to...
It's not going to roll down like that.
Right. I do not know the exact weight, though. But yeah, probably less, but still enough.
It's substantial.
Yeah. Last year marked the retirement of Chris Anderson, who was basically the Joey Chestnut of cheese rolling. He had 23 victories in 14 years of competing. And at first I thought like, so he has multiple victories in a year. That actually makes it less impressive. And then I realized, no, that's more impressive. Like he rolled down that hill and won and said, I'm going to roll down again.
I'm doing that again.
In like 30 minutes and then wins again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And in his 14 years and 23, in the 14 years of him doing this race, he managed to break an ankle, suffer a concussion, a torn calf muscle, and bruised kidneys. So honestly, I think he got off pretty well.
That seems pretty good.
Yeah. And he says his secret is that like The goal is to stay on your feet as much as possible, and the way to really do well is you have to work on your technique of getting back up. And I've seen interviews with amateur cheese rollers, and that's one of the big things that they stress that they practice is like, I'm practicing some like a martial art or something that helps me to get back on my feet after falling, and the recovery technique is like the real key to victory. I think my favorite cheese rolling stat here is last year's women's division winner, Delaney Irving of Canada. She won the race while unconscious. She takes a real hard hit to her head like a few feet before the finish line, and she bounces across the finish line, and she almost loses too. So there's someone else like coming in real hot, and it's like a photo finish, but she wins, and like she's just laying on the ground. Then they have to like take her on the stretcher and take her back to the medical tent, and then eventually when she comes to, they inform her that she was the winner.
That's insane.
And when they ask her like, are you going to do this again next year? She's like, yeah, probably. So let's say that you want to become a cheese roller yourself. The great thing is that the barrier to entry is extremely low. You just show up, free admission. Because they're worried about being sued so much, the organizational part of it is like, it's very unofficial. Like the less business parts they have, the more
it's
like
basically just people show up at this hill and then someone rolls cheese and they run.
Yeah, so very easy. You could just fly to the area and go to the town, show up, and be at the top of the hill in the morning, and you can go and do this. And I also wanted to quickly tell you about the extended culture of cheese rolling, which like it's not even a pun. Like cheese culture is a thing, right? Or not? I think that's something to do with like the process.
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
I watched a 20-minute short film about cheese rolling, and the crazy part is it was not a documentary. Like that's what you think of when you think of like, oh, like this weird sport. It was like a very well done short film about like a teenage girl who wanted to follow in the family footsteps of cheese rolling, and her mom didn't want her to because it was too dangerous. And she like makes a friend along the way, and there's training montages, and like she rolls down the hill, and it's one of these like comedies that takes itself very seriously to be funny.
Right.
But like it was very fun to watch this, and like people are making movies about this dumb sport. But yeah, like the overwhelming sentiment I get from the cheese rolling community is that the contestants, they know the race they know it's stupid, and they know it is very dangerous. And I think that's part of the allure to them. In the same way that skateboarding is a thing people do, or skydiving. Like, yeah, most skydiving's safe, and there's just that slight chance you'll die, but like the adrenaline rush you get is like the fun part. I think people just get this adrenaline rush bouncing down a hill with thousands of people cheering you on. Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. Just as a reminder, our next episode coming up here is our listener episode. So please send those emails if you have anything that you want us to research and let you know about. What's yours at factoidpodcast.com.
And as always, you can find us everywhere you find all your podcasts, or on our website at factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.